Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Halo pemirsa, kembali bersama saya Nuriyatul Lailiyah dalam Kongkow Pesantren Kebangsaan Podcast atau Podcast KPK. Kali ini saya ditemani oleh seorang peneliti dari Leeds University, Dr. Jonathan Davis Smith, yang banyak melakukan penelitian tentang pesantren di Indonesia. Nah, wawancara ini akan sepenuhnya dilakukan bahasa Inggris, dan nantinya kalau Anda ingin tahu lebih banyak, Dr. Jonathan Davis Smith ini juga bisa bahasa Indonesia, but we're gonna have to bring our conversation in English. Hello, Dr. Jonathan. Thanks for being here with us. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Saya senang sekali untuk sini di pesantren.
Okay.
Terima kasih atas undangan semuanya.
Yeah. How is it Semarang so far for you?
Yeah.
For this past 2 days, yeah?
This is the first time I've been to the area around Undip and this pesantren. Before, I've only been to the Kota Lama or close to the sea. The city. It's very, a different atmosphere up in the, Semarang atas.
Yes, true.
More green, more cool. So it's,
But not as cool as in Leeds, yeah?
No, that's true. Leeds, much more cold.
It's cool, no longer cool, it's cold, yeah.
Yeah, not dingin.
Yeah, and Dr. Jonathan, you've been around 3 years living in Indonesia, back and forth, going to the United States and then to England, and then also coming back here for your research, also for becoming visiting lecturer here. What makes you feel like, once you came here, what makes you feel like you need to stay here longer?
Yeah, good question. Well, Indonesia is a very attractive place to study, I think, for my research, because I study about religious groups and culture and how they work with issues with the environment. So as we know, in Indonesia, the issues around the environment, like the rest of the world, are many. You know, for example, in Semarang, we have a lot of banjir rob, some floods, other flooding, heating, the ground is sinking in some places. So it means that there's a lot of climate issues, but also very many types of cultures and religions that live together. And my research is about, with colleagues at CRCS, Pusat Studi Agama dan Lintas Budaya, di Sekolah Pasca Sarjana UGM, about how these groups use religious creativity, kreativitas religius, untuk merespons krisis iklim. So ada banyak kasus sangat menarik dan bisa belajar banyak. We can learn a lot from these cases here in Indonesia.
Yeah, and I also once read your article on pesantren. Why pesantren then?
Yeah, I think pesantren are very interesting because maybe similar to universities in some ways, that you have an idea of learning and development, but also you have an idea of ethics, how to live well. And also because it's a place that not only people study, but they also live. So because it's a community, then it means people have to say, okay, how do we deal with waste? How do we deal with water? And they have to make decisions, but also they can find creative or new ways to deal with these issues that can be different from the rest of the community. They can experiment, they can be creative.
Yeah, and how is it so far? What you figure out as interesting thing that you find in pesantren, because people outside pesantren have a lot of prejudice against pesantren, right? As a researcher, how have you been find it interesting and unlike other people prejudice on pesantren? What do you see?
Well, I didn't know so much about the prejudice about pesantren, so it's new for me. But yeah, what we found, because in studying about, for example, recycling or ways of living with nature, we always talk about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle. But usually in the West and some places in Indonesia, but I think especially in the West, we focus more on the reuse. There's a lot of thrifting, these kind of things, and a lot on the recycle, but we don't focus so much on reduce.
Yeah.
But I think in pesantren there's a lot of tradition of kurang konsumsi, that we should part of being a good person is trying to reduce what we take from the world.
Okay.
And I think so. There's so many interesting cases of this in Pesantren. So this is like a part of living well with nature, is also thinking about how much we take from nature.
Okay, that is very interesting. And like we talked about it before, the way how people in pesantren have this tradition of tirakat. Yeah, there is also a sort of manifesting on reducing things, on consuming things. And how do you see it so far in pesantren? Like practically, what you see as a researcher in part of reducing, in which part that you find it interesting?
Yeah, well, I think it's one is about using water. So there is a focus, I think, in places where there's not very much water, like in dry climates, to let's say take a shower that is very short, or to reduce use of water. But yeah, I think here what you see in a lot of pesantren, that there's about reducing the use of water, especially reducing like buying clothes, buying things.
Yes.
So just less needing to have things. So you have like, only a few things, and that's enough.
True. I'm a pesantren graduate, so I totally understand the idea. Like how the santri need to obey the rule on only have some numbers of clothes and like. Also the thing with mubazir, the concept of mubazir. Yeah. Have you heard about mubazir?
Tell me more. What it means to you? Yeah.
Mubazir in pesantren, like it's not originally from pesantren, but it's actually a concept in Islam, how people not to waste on their food, not to waste too much on the resources like water, etc. That's also the thing that's being taught in pesantren, actually. Yeah,
that's interesting. And I think with these concepts, people can then take them and use them in kind of new creative ways. Yeah. So one of the things we looked at was the ways in which water is used for wudu. So because you have to use a certain amount of water for wudu, but also in some places where there is less water, people will make allowances. Like like in deserts, people will use dust or So
the concept of tayammum.
What's interesting, that people can find creative ways to work with what they have in nature.
Okay. And what makes you like? I can see that for being in 3 years of researching on getting close with Indonesian religious community, especially the Muslim and also the pesantren. What makes you feel so welcome? I mean, not just welcome. Like I can see that you feel like it is part of. It's very natural that you're fit in this community. What makes it?
Well, I think people are very open and very friendly, so it's easy to talk to people. And I think also maybe, because pesantren often are communities, I said, of learning, so people want to learn something new. So they're happy to meet new people, to ask questions, to explore new ideas. So I think even like this thing of having a podcast, it's not enough just to study the text. We also have to learn other things beyond just religious texts. So this is a part of our worship, right? Is also learning about the world around us. So I really see that in a lot of course, not all pesantren, not all universities are the same. You have a lot of differences in some or the other. But a lot of the ones that I've been to, I've seen a lot of this kind of openness and hospitality and curiosity.
Okay, and this is particular. I asked this because as a female and in the net, like I used to live in pesantren, and being in this community, how do you see female having role in this community?
Yeah, well, I can't say I mean, my experience is probably different, visiting, sometimes actually interesting. Sometimes when I've been to pesantren, I've gone by myself, and sometimes I've gone with my wife. And I think when we compare our experience, it's different.
Okay.
The experience I have, because she would maybe go and spend more time with some of the women, in like asrama or something, whereas I would be in a different area. But I think the there's still a lot of openness. Like I went one time to a pesantren in Jogja that was a pesantren for women, only like specifically for women, and they had an English class.
Okay.
And I joined as one of the like visiting
Native.
So to have like a discussion,
Yeah.
and we had a really interesting discussion where they asked a lot of questions, about living, in the US or the UK, and about some of my experiences in different places, and ask really interesting and good questions. And we had and also I asked them questions about their life, and we had a really good conversation.
And like as Westerner, we've heard, basically, as someone living in international community, I've seen a lot of prejudice against Indonesian female Muslim women. Basically, what do you think that the West doesn't know about us, which you think that they should know, that there is this kind of thing in pesantren or in Indonesian religious community or Islam? Yeah,
that's a really important question, and I guess also you have some experience, right, of living in Europe as a Muslim, and I think there's not very good education about other cultures. So in a lot of places, definitely in some parts of the US and the UK where I've lived, I think people they are learning more about other cultures from the media and from negative stereotypes that they see either in the media or in social media. And I think because of this, they don't, it's hard for people to distinguish between, for example, how someone dresses and what their practices or beliefs are like. And it's very strange. I think it's strange because, for example, in the UK, if you look at a picture of the Queen, who recently passed away, there's a tradition in the UK that women used to wear like a scarf. It looked really similar to a hijab, but it's not used very much anymore. But for some reason, when people see that, they think, oh, that's normal. But when they see a hijab that's being like used by Muslim, then they think, oh,
they see
there's something. It means something. But so it's just, I think it's a lot just a lack of understanding and education. And it's usually also because one of the places I lived in London is a place called Tower Hamlets, which is in East London, and it has a very large community from Bangladesh originally. So a lot of people, both men and women, who were dressed in a much more Muslim looking or not Asian looking way. But what was interesting, I think, is that people who live there, they had very good relationships with them. So, there would be a mosque, and they would always invite churches and other people to come visit, and we had very good relationships with them. But then people from outside the community, from other places, would come in and do demonstrations or make trouble in the community. So it wasn't really so much even a problem in the community. So I think there's a larger problem in Europe, which is that I think, and to some extent in the US, but that
Islamophobic,
that there isn't people who have good interaction with people so they make assumptions, but they also don't have anyone to speak to know personally. So it's just because like London is a very diverse place, but if you go outside of London to some small towns, maybe similar in Germany, if you between going in Berlin and then you go out into like a village, the people they haven't met people. They don't have friends who are from other religions, so they don't know how to relate to them, and they haven't learned how to relate to them. So I think it's a problem. But I think this is maybe what's different about Indonesia, and one of the reasons I like studying here is because people from many different religions live together for many hundreds of years. They had experience of living together, and because of that, I think it creates a different type of relationship. So like people's relatives and ancestors, and you have a history together. So I think this is something that we are struggling with in Europe and in the US as well, is how to make a new life together after people have come from different countries. How do we live together well? And we're still working on this.
Well, we are also still working on this, but like it's very interesting the way you say it, that how you see Indonesia, as if I'm not mistaken, I perceive it this way, that you see Indonesia is more diverse in that sense compared to US or like have I get it right?
Yeah, well, I think not. Well, the US is very diverse, but I think there isn't always a good tradition of living together. There's a tendency people would come from another place, and then they, for example, Europeans came to the US and they treated other Europeans well, but they didn't treat the Native Americans or people who became slaves well. So there's a tendency to sort of segment people into groups and create these differences. Whereas in Europe, I think it's more that it also happened, but what happened more is that there wasn't so much diversity for a long time. So I think that's quite different than Indonesia. It doesn't mean that because people are different that they will live together and it will be fine. If you have a history, then it's easier to know that you were able to do it in the past. You have a history of living together.
Yeah, because like for general people, like we see differences just because of the originality of the nations, instead of like people could be different by the ethnicity and etc., but still have the history of living together for years. That's also part of the blessing of being Indonesian. And like not so many of us sometimes we don't gratitude enough on that kind of blessing, and like thank you for reminding us. So basically pemirsa, yang disampaikan barusan sangat penting karena mengingatkan kita tentang pentingnya mensyukuri perbedaan yang kita miliki dan sejarah bahwa kita sudah hidup dalam ratusan tahun bersama. We gonna go to the further discussion on this. So Jonathan, what is your project that you are doing right now, which related to? Is there any project related to pesantren again at this moment?
Not sort of a specific project in a pesantren, but we are doing a project with different social movements who work in pesantren. One of the ones that we've been looking at lately is trying to look at the different economic models that are used in pesantren. So there's the idea of what we call eco pesantren, which you may have heard before, which is like a pesantren that has some interest in being environmentally friendly or eco-friendly. But also there's a big difference between the different eco pesantren in how they
practice,
the ways in which they practice. So one department in our university, they did a program on certifying eco pesantren, on different aspects. So they have like 10 different aspects, and each eco pesantren will submit evidence about what they're doing in these aspects of being eco-friendly in different ways. So it's very interesting to see, I think.
And it's very interesting, and it's sort of new, even for me. Would you mind to elaborate more on what is like eco-pesantren?
Yeah, so I think it's a term that was used partly by people from outside. It wasn't necessarily used by the pesantren. So people would go to a pesantren and see, for example, they are recycling their waste, or they plant trees around the area, or something that seems kind of eco, and then they give the term, this must be an eco pesantren. And some pesantren, because of that, they also adopted this name for themselves, so they use it as like their own identity, that they are a kind of an eco pesantren. But I think like I said, what that means can be different in different places. It could be something very simple, like for example, trying to reduce waste, or it could be some of them have a full educational program, like environmental education, that they work with students with Santri from a young age, and to do projects and to kind of advance in this way. So it really depends on the pesantren.
Well, that's very interesting. And how you see pesantren being able to being part of the global citizen? Would it be possible for pesantren community to participate in becoming global citizen? How you see it?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of students who are alumni of Pesantren go on to live overseas. I mean, like you and your family, did, and so through their studies or through work, they often end up interact with other people. I think, I think to some extent now, because we have social media, because we have other ways of communicating, that people are more aware of what's happening in other countries. And something I think that's really made a difference is the fact that we have so many tools to translate and use subtitles and things. So it seems like it's easier now. In the West now, there are so many, like K-pop and even like recently Budot, the Philippine music. It's like dangdut, but in the Philippines became really popular in the US because of some TikTok videos using this music. And then even I started to see some dangdut in some videos, like TikTok videos in the US.
Yeah,
so
there's some trending dangdut song on TikTok.
Exactly, yeah. So people start to learn about other cultures in a way that they didn't know about before. In fact, I think I've seen a video on TikTok about the Pesantren that uses Western like rock music as part of their sholawat. And when I was on TikTok one time, I saw it and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I feel something like there are ways that people can communicate to a wider audience that before wasn't so easy. So this is maybe a good opportunity. I mean, having a podcast like this is a good way to communicate outside of the Pesantren with people from different countries and different parts of Indonesia as well.
Yes, and how would you describe Pesantren if you need to explain it to foreigner in a simple way? How? Because as you mentioned before, it related to some ethics, also education, not just because we have a lot of boarding schools in abroad, right? Like what would it be different? Like how would you say simply explaining what is Pesantren to other people?
Well, it's funny because people have different. Like you said, a boarding school in the UK is everyone knows about it. It has a history, and then also we have, for example, like Harry Potter. So people know like, okay, this is normal that, or people heard of it. Oh, people go to a boarding school. So often, if in the UK, I would say, it's like a boarding school, but it's more open for everyone. It's not, because usually boarding schools in the UK are very expensive and very exclusive. So I say it's like a boarding school, but more for people, often for people who can't even afford school. So it's like providing education for people who can't. And then also it's trying to integrate between Islamic education and modern education in different ways. So it's kind of an interesting kind of creative way of trying to do both Islamic education and also like modern or non-religious education as well.
But have you seen this kind of education abroad? Like you've been to Africa, you've been to Middle East, like you've been to a lot of countries. Like have you seen any kind of this education also in Islamic countries, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have it, but I think the maybe what's different from other countries I've been to is just the number of schools, because you can always find some, in different countries. But I feel like just maybe especially in Java, I don't know if it's the same in other places in Indonesia, but just the number of Pesantren and number of students who attend Pesantren is just such a big sector of the educational system. So I think that's something that makes it really unique. So because not only you have all of the options for students, because you have different types of Pesantren, different types of education, but also then you have the Santri identity. So then you have a group of people who also are important for politics and voting and culture and all kinds of aspects. So it's almost more than just going to school. It's like an identity as well.
Okay, and it becomes also a culture, a value, like it's embedded to the person, compared to a regular boarding school, for example. So what do you think that we as the Pesantren community should have? What kind of skill that we should have, that you think we should have, to be able to navigate in these times, during these times, and be able to moving advance, like trying to cross the boundaries being in our way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I grew up in the U.S. and for some of my life in school, I was homeschooled, which is which is quite common in the U.S. And one of the reasons people homeschool is because they don't trust that the school system will teach what they want that they want their children to learn, so they educate them themselves. But one of the things I notice about that is that also it tends to sometimes make the students very insular, like very internal. So you end up not meeting a lot of people who are different, not interacting with people so much. And I think what I notice about the good pesantren is that they provide a really good atmosphere for students to learn from each other, but also to meet people outside, to have interaction in both ways. So either, they bring in different groups of scientists and creatives to interact with the students, or they also, the Santri can go out and meet other people. So I think having the close environment, but also the opportunity to go out and to meet other people and to have other people come in is a really good mix. To have both of those is, I think, really helpful.
Okay, but there is also the condition that we are having in pesantren, like being somehow not voluntarily, but being pushed to constantly being with other people, because we have this common, we have the same room, we have we practically we share everything, almost everything. And what do you think that pesantren can improve in that sense?
Well, I mean, I'm not really,
or maybe to Santri, to the younger generation.
Yeah, I do think this is something also that we have had a problem with in Western institutions, in schools, especially private institutions, is that sometimes people, they have a lot of good intentions, but if they don't manage the institution well, then there can be a lot of abuse. So not only abuse sometimes you have abuse scandals in a lot of different institutions, but also just financial mismanagement or other problems because it's not managed very well. So I think there's an importance, I think, in having a good accountability, that you don't have a situation where any institution can just do what they want and there's no accountability, there's not oversight. So I think having some type of accountability both within the institution and outside. And I think, this is what I've noticed with some of the more modern pesantren, but also the Santri can give their own opinion. It's not only just they should accept whatever happens, but also there's some amount of feedback, they can, because also they can share their experience. And for example, we've been doing a project, I forgot to mention this, a project about religion and mental health. And one of the things you look at is how do pesantren take care of the mental health of Santri, and to be able to take care of someone's mental health, you have to know how they are. You have to ask them, and you have to see what's affecting them in their lives, and what do they need in order to be in a good environment. So I think having some ways to have feedback and input from the Santri is also a good system.
You just mentioned it now about the religion and mental health. What kind of program is that?
So that's a project I've been doing with another lecturer at our department. His name is Iqbal Ahnaf, and he is, in addition to being a lecturer, he also is founded a pesantren in the western part of Yogyakarta.
What pesantren?
It's called Bumi Cendekia.
I know it.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so they've been trying to put in place a program about taking care of about mental health for the students, for the Santri. And also we've been doing research in other institutions, both Christian and Muslim and secular, about this. So the idea is just to what extent, because there's a thing, can religion can help people with mental health problems, but also for some people religion can make their mental health problems worse. So it's the ways in which religion can be useful for helping people to become more healthy, more safe, more whole.
Okay. Yeah, that's also actually related to one slice of my research, how during the COVID, religion becomes part of the solution or part of during the crisis, religion often become place of hope for people to overcome their situation emotionally.
Yeah.
Well, it's been very interesting to talk to you about this.
Thank you.
I also learned a lot, and
Same for me.
Well, thank you. And pemirsa, menarik sekali obrolan hari ini. Kita juga punya kesempatan banyak untuk belajar perspektif dari peneliti luar tentang bagaimana pesantren dan juga bagaimana cara pandang orang luar terhadap kita. Dan kita juga belajar beberapa tips tentang bagaimana kita sebagai komunitas dari pesantren bisa menjadi bagian dari global citizen. Terakhir dari saya, tetap semangat, dan untuk para santri, we have a long way to go to be a global citizen. Jadi selalu belajar, tetap semangat, dan sampai jumpa di podcast berikutnya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Jonathan.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Assalamualaikum.